Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. We got a lot of requests for some videos. So this one we will be talking about Azure one-on-one licensing, like the basics of the basics. We've done this before, but this is going to be quick, short, and snappy. So if you want to learn how Azure works, how you license it, what you can do with it, stick with us. We're going to talk about how you can set up your environment, but also how you can save big with Azure through things like reserved instances, Azure Hybrid Benefit, and license mobility. So if you're just getting started with Azure, if you're already running workloads, understanding cost-saving techniques is crucial. So let's get started. Let me just add my screen. So what are we talking about? Azure itself, how to cut cost, how to stay flexible, and how to optimize your cloud spend. So first and foremost, let's talk pay-as-you-go. So pay-as-you-go, like the name itself says, or PAYG, you're charged by the second, minute, hour, gigabyte, database. It's got a way of charging you for a certain unit against a certain time, usually the monthly period that you're using the service. There's never an upfront commitment. You have full flexibility, so it's ideal for things like dev test, running pilots, handling short-term burst loads if you require this. But there's a catch. Pay-as-you-go is probably the most expensive way to run your long-term workloads. So if you have a steady-state data center, for instance, and you want to keep your services running for 24/7, you'll almost certainly pay more compared to other options. So if you require flexibility, this is great, but not so cost efficient in steady state scenarios. Usually a lot of customers are used to running their data center on a 24/7 basis. So if you want to do that, what can you do alternatively? Well, you can use something like reserved instances. Reserved instances provide a licensing vehicle is to provide predictable savings. So you commit to a 1 or a 3-year term, you save up to 70% to your pay-go pricing by reducing the cost of your virtual machines or databases or anything that you can reserve. This is obviously best for steady-state workloads. So think databases, production applications, VMs, that will always be on. There will always be required, that need to be accessible at all times. And then you could consider moving these services to a reserved instance. So you have two options to choose from: standard RIs, biggest discounts, less flexibility, and convertible RIs, slightly smaller discounts. But you can switch VM families if you need this change. And if you combine RIs with other benefits that we're going to talk about next, like hybrid benefit, the savings get even better, which obviously you would want. 72%, for instance, I think is based on the number with additional savings through Azure Hybrid Benefit. So let's dive into that now. So Azure Hybrid Benefit, or as I like to call it, don't pay twice. It's a powerful cost-saving program from Microsoft to not cannibalize on their own investments or your investments really on Windows Server and SQL Server. So if you already own Windows Server or SQL Server licenses with software assurance, you could bring those licenses to Azure. This means that you don't have to pay for the operating system or the SQL Server licensing again on your Azure VMs. You're only paying for the compute. And the result, you can save up to, in some cases, 80% when you combine reserved instance with Azure Hybrid Benefit. For example, a Windows VM on pay-as-you-go might cost you, a very heavy machine, $1,000 a month. But if you add a reserved instance and you use Azure Hybrid Benefit to its max capacity, you could bring that down to around $200 a month. So here you straight away see that you can actually reduce your cost in the Azure cloud significantly. So if you already have software assurance on things like Windows Server and SQL Server, make sure that you're taking advantage of them. It's such low-hanging fruit. There's a downside to this as well. You need to make sure that you have these licenses. So we see a lot of companies that start using Azure Hybrid Benefit. They'll continuously put Azure Bring Your Own License on all the VMs, all the databases that they're spinning up, without checking to see if they actually have these entitlements in their contract. So make sure, especially if you're in software asset management space, that you are aware that there's a financial mechanic behind this as well, and you need to maintain those licenses with software assurance in your contract. Now, next up, and finally for this session, license mobility. License mobility allows you to bring eligible server application licenses like SQL Server, like SharePoint Server, like Exchange Server to, for instance, Azure, but also any other hosting provider, provided that you have active software assurance on your licenses. The difference between hybrid benefit and license mobility are subtle, but quite important. Hybrid benefit applies to Windows Server and SQL Server licensing. And license mobility applies to server applications layered on top of that. So you have your infrastructure layer through VMs, you have your database layer through PaaS, and then you have your server applications like Exchange and SharePoint on top of that. You can bring those to the Azure cloud as well, providing you have software assurance in it. In practice, it gives you more freedom to migrate workloads to Azure without having to rebuy licenses or switch to different type of licensing programs, like, for instance, SaaS. Now, putting it all together. So how do these options work together? Here's a simple way to think about it. Use pay-as-you-go when you need full flexibility, dev test, pilot, unpredictable workloads that you turn on and off. Use reserved instances for predictable workloads that you know are going to be on 24/7, even less than 24/7. But if they're on a majority of the time throughout a year, throughout a month, reserved instances might make sense. Layer on Azure Hybrid Benefit if you already own licenses with software assurance for Windows Server and SQL Server. And for other services where you have licenses, use license mobility if you want to migrate those applications to the Azure cloud. Together, these options can slash your Azure bill significantly, often by more than half, while still giving you the flexibility where you need it. So to wrap it up, Microsoft gives you multiple levers of control for your Azure cost, but you need to know how to and when to use them. If you're not sure whether you're using these benefits fully, chances are you're leaving money on the table. If you're not sure, if you like us to review your Azure setup, this is something that we do on a daily basis. If you need more tips like this, happy to provide to you. Subscribe to our channel, sign up for our newsletter, check the links in the description, and definitely keep watching for the next videos, because we'll be doing much more of these. Finally, if there's anything specific that you want to see from us or that you want to talk about, you can always drop me a line. Yeah, that was it for now. So I want to thank you very much for watching, and see you on the next one.